Guys, welcome out. Action Army Podcast. This is number 1 for us. Really appreciate you giving us your time. I'm Ben Jordan.
How's it going? I'm Austin Avalar.
Austin, give us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are.
So really quick, I've been a sales professional basically my entire adult life. Unfortunately, I was not born into a place where I was given many talents. And so the one job that will hire you without any education or without any special talents or without any knowing anyone is sales. And so everything that can be sold that has to do with a house or going into a house or building a house, I've had the privilege of learning about and selling either in a large scale or small. And for the last 5 years now, I've been dedicated to the services, so the trades, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical.
Yeah, so kind of the little bit of what we wanted to talk about, especially on our first podcast today. We're going to talk about, a lot of what we're going to do. Austin is going to kind of ask me a few questions about me and how we got started. Austin and I have been friends for a while now, and, we've been on this journey for at least last 5 years now. I've been on this journey for, 15, 20 years almost now. So it's crazy to say that. I don't think I was that old, but we've been on this journey in the home services that has led us to be able to live the lives that we're living right now. And that's what we want to share with everybody that, is following, that people are going to be following, because a lot of people understand that you can literally map out your own life and you can do that while being in the trades.
Absolutely. And one of the greatest things and being in sales, it has taught me my entire life, no matter what you're selling, is that you control your paycheck. You have the opportunity to design your own future. And it's all based off your personal effort and what you're willing to sacrifice in order to gain it. And so I've been able to have a wife and 4 kids, and my wife doesn't work and providing for them all off a commission sales job. And people hear commission, they think it's scary, but it's the best way.
What's crazy is a lot of people, especially nowadays, there's not very many people that have, big families. I actually come from a family of 10 kids.
Yeah.
Right. My mom, and my dad had 10 kids together. Right. And then my mom ended up passing away when I was young, or I was 13 when my mom passed away. And then when she passed away, my dad got remarried 4 years later, right, and had 4 more kids. So actually there's 14 kids total in my family. There's 10 of us that are from the same mom and dad. And then my dad had 4 more kids, right? So when we were growing up, my dad was in the appliance repair business, okay? So it's services, home services. We did minor plumbing jobs. We did a little bit of HVAC, but most of what we did is, we fixed refrigerators, we fixed dryers, washers, that kind of stuff. So growing up, I was always around, customers. I was always around. I remember, making my first sale on a washer and dryer, a used washer and dryer in the back of my dad's shop when I was 9. So It's I've been in sales, and I've seen where things, can start, right? Especially in appliance repair. Appliance repair is not really the trades, right? When we talk about trades, we're talking about plumbing, HVAC, electrical, know. And it was, I vividly remember when we were young, we'd be driving down the road, and my dad would point out and be like, "See that bank right there? That bank's owned by a plumber." And I'm like, I remember that, and it always stuck with me, in my later part of life when I started my own plumbing company. It was like that plumbing, that a plumber owned that bank. He said plumbers and electricians and HVAC guys, they own the banks. And that to me always stood out to hey, that's an upper level type stuff there,
Dude, Ben, I gotta imagine growing up with that many kids in the house, there must have been a fair level of competition amongst you and your siblings.
Nine boys. So there's 9 boys, 5 girls. And so there was constant competition, right?
And especially not having your mom there in the later years to really control the situation, you must have been wild. We had a wrestling
mat in our basement.
Yeah.
Just to say, to put it in context, we had a wrestling mat in our basement, right? So we're very highly competitive, and we're a wrestling family, right? So,
yeah.
When things would get crazy, I'm the third oldest, and the 3 oldest are all boys. And so when things got really crazy, it was my dad, instead of, getting mad, and he's just go downstairs.
Go use the mat.
We go wrestle, right? We go down there and beat the hell out of each other.
That's why it's there.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, that's excellent. And let's dig in a little bit because it sounds like that your childhood played a big role in why you got into the services?
Yeah, honestly, so I remember vividly, when I was the year I turned 13. So I turned 13 in October, and my mom got diagnosed with cancer in December. And I was homeschooled. It was kind of crazy. My dad and my mom came to me and said, "Hey, your mom wants to homeschool you." I was kind of troubled. I didn't really do well in school, and so he's like, "Your mom's going to homeschool you this year." I was okay, and so started getting homeschooled in August, right? And I turned 13 in October, and then my mom, she was real sick in between then, right? They couldn't figure out what was going on with her, and then in December, she ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, right? My little sister was born in September, and then I turned 13 in October, and then my mom got diagnosed in December with cancer. And so that kind of turned everything upside down. My dad ended up taking her to a hospital in Mexico, and she ended up passing away in March of the next year.
Yeah.
So that was, for us, it was kind of, it was crazy. My dad owned his own appliance repair business. He probably had 30 or 40 employees. So it was pretty big for an appliance repair business. And when he wasn't there, my uncles and everybody were trying to help out. My mom played a big role in the business. And so when she passed away, things were kind of crazy. And so I remember that next summer, right, going into my 14, when I was about to turn 14 that next year. So that summer before, I remember my dad saying, "Hey, we need all hands on deck." And I remember as soon as school got out, we started going straight to work. We'd go to work at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, and we'd work all day long. And I mean, in those days, it was crazy. Like, people were calling so much, right? And it was family-owned business, so my aunts and my uncles worked there. And that's where we really started learning the ins and outs of, taking phone calls. We started in the office, right, as receptionist. And I remember, I didn't have a real deep voice. I was 13, sounded like a little girl. So I would answer the phone, and then people would call back. It was kind of funny that they used to have a running a laugh in the office where they'd call me Benita, because people would call and be like, "Hey, can I talk to that young girl, Benita?" And they'd be like, "Hey, Benita, you're needed here." So we started by answering the phone, and then we had technicians, and then we'd go from answering phone to dispatching, and we learned how to dispatch, how to handle customers, and the customer complaints, and we would deal with the BBB, and we would deal with all of these different aspects of the business inside the business. But one of the greatest things I got from it, especially in those early years when we were working, is just the work ethic. We had to be there, and we had to really put out, because my dad needed us so much. And so we would work from day, early in the morning till night, and we'd work Monday through Saturday. And then Sunday, was the day we went to church, and the day that we worked on the family farm. My dad has about 400 or 500 acres. And so we'd work out there with the horses and the cows and everything. And so it really taught us, a level of, we always had a level of ownership, where it's like, "Hey, this is my dad's business. We really need to put everything we have into it, because this is, how we pay. This is how he pays the bills." So from an early age, I remember learning how to work and being able to put in those hours, which actually helped me so much in my later part of my life, when I started getting different jobs and I started working for other people, because I never lost that. I never lost that sense of ownership of working for somebody, and never lost that ownership feeling that I had while working for somebody, because I always treated it like mine. Didn't matter who I was working for. I always treated it like, "Hey, I'm going to put every bit of effort I have into this, because this is a reflection of me."
Yeah. I mean, geez, being forced into it kind of at a young age, not kind of like, what kid at that age is going to choose to go work that many hours and work that hard and answer phones and run calls? I have an 8-year-old son. I can't even imagine having a 9-year-old selling me something. That would just be hilarious. I'd probably just say yes, just because, like, "Oh, yes, of course, little sonny. Yeah, here you go. Let me write you a check."
I wish it was that easy. I remember, it's kind of funny. I remember them walking in, and they're like, "Hey, we want to look at a washer and a dryer." And I remember vividly, my dad had this one guy that used to work with him. His name was Juan. And every time I saw Juan, he'd always give me like change for like the little peanut machine my dad had in the front of the Skittles, and he'd always be like, "I get these from the appliances." And because they would get truckloads of old appliances in, and if you ever been through a dryer, they always collect quarters or whatever you can find in washers or dryers, all the time. And so he would give me those quarters, and I remember I was telling the customer, like, "Yeah, like my dad's worker, he gets quarters out of these things, right? And these appliances are great." I told him, I said, "I've been around this a long time." And I remember telling the
9
guy,
years
like,
old.
I've been around these
I've
appliances
been
a
doing
long
this
time.
for a while.
Yeah. I've been around these appliances
Yeah.
a long time, and these things, they work good. And I remember he would be like, well, how old are they? And I'm like, they're a couple of years old. They're used appliances, but they're going to last you a long time. And I remember my grandma, she had a sales pitch. She would tell me like the warranty and like what was done to them, and like what's the greatest thing about that specific brand. And I remember the guy like, gosh, how old are you? Like 9 years old? You're like, you already know all this stuff. I'm like, well, like I kind of picked up on it. I enjoyed it. And so I picked up on it.
Yeah.
But one of the craziest things was when they started making me dispatch and stuff, like my attention span is really short. And so I remember my Aunt Barb was the main dispatcher in the office, and she would be in there working us, telling us what to do. And every so often I'd sneak into the back, they had torches back there, and I would light the torches and I'd start soldering. I taught myself how to solder with the torches just in the back by myself because I hated being in the office. I hated answering phones. I didn't know how necessary it was going to be for me and how much it was going to affect my career, being able to answer phones, be able to talk to customers like that. But I would always sneak in the back and like try to learn how to fix appliances from the guys in the back because there's always people training back there. And, that really pushed me into my next stage of the whole entire business, which was actually getting on the road and getting in my own truck. And I remember vividly my dad coming in one summer, the year I turned 16, and I had my license, and he said, well, it's time for you to get on the road. We got too many calls. You're going to have to go run. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't really even know how to fix appliances. I know a little bit how to get around. I've never had any formal training. I've never had any real formal sales training. And now I got to go to these people's homes. And not only do I have to fix their appliance, but I have to present an estimate, and actually I have to diagnose it, and I have to present an estimate in a manner where they're going to buy from me so I can have the opportunity to fix their appliance. And I'm just like, oh gosh. So I remember first job I went to, it was a refrigerator call. And I mean, this refrigerator, was probably 10 years old, and it had a bad compressor on it. The compressor is what the cooling mechanism for the actual refrigerator, right? So I knew enough where I could understand and I could talk through it, right? And so I tell these customers like, hey, you got a bad compressor on here, we need to change it out. And in those days, I think it was like $850 to change this compressor out, right? And now I think about it, I'm like, gosh, dang, $850 to change a compressor out. And it was probably like a 2.5 hour job. And I mean, you got to remove all the stuff. You got to solder all the stuff back in there. And these things are like this big. The lines are really small. You have to go through a bunch of procedures. I remember the guy's like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Let's get it done. And I was like, uh-oh. I never changed the compressor in my life.
You didn't expect him to say yes.
No. And so I was like, uh-oh. And I remember I get back there, I push the thing out, I get all my tools right. And I called my brother. I'm like, hey, I sold a compressor job. I need you to walk me through how to do this. He's like, oh boy. And so I remember I had the phone like this, and I'm doing everything he tells me to do. And I mean, it worked out perfect. And that, it gave me so much confidence that I could do that because I knew enough, right? I taught myself how to solder. I knew how refrigeration worked. I knew how to charge systems, and from there, it just, snowballed. It took me from, being a kid that really didn't know much, right? To being able to, from 16, that summer, my 16-year-old year, when I got my license, from June when we got out of school, right? So like right end of May, almost beating in June, till we went back to school in August, I think I made $36,000 that summer.
Holy smokes.
And I was 16 years old. So I was like, wow, because we got paid on commission. And, it was crazy. I didn't know that people could make that kind of money, right? I had friends that their parents didn't make that kind of money, and I made that money in 2.5 months. Yeah. So that, like, to me, it sparked something in me, right? And I like to work, and my dad, he pushed us pretty hard, so we worked all the time. And that just sparked something in me. And then the next year I come back, right? And we would work after school. We went during sports and stuff, and we would work after school and we would do stuff, but it wasn't like full time. And then the summer times would come around again. Then we'd hit it hard again. We'd have our morning practices, for football. We'd do like our morning workouts, and then we'd go to work and we'd work, I think we'd get to work at 8:30 or 9, and we'd work until midnight. There was never, ever not calls. That was the greatest thing about my dad's business, is that they had tons of calls all the time. And I figured out at a young age that if I could just be specialized in something and I could learn it and I could study as hard as I possibly could when I wasn't at work, and I could learn how to communicate with people, that they would, trust me, and they would trust me in that process of leading them through to be able to fix their appliance.
Yeah. So trial by fire as a kid, like you got to learn the business from the ground up, and probably one of the best educations you could ever get. Like learning the business from taking the calls, being called Benita with your little girl voice, to going through puberty, having your voice cracking while you're dispatching, learning how to solder, and then eventually at 16 getting on the road. Mm-hmm. Like that's an amazing way to learn the business. So from there, now let's talk about your first actual job in the trades, because that's home services, but getting into the professional trades, plumbing, HVAC, electrical. Where did you start, and what was it like?
So I, in between graduating high school and getting that first job, I went on a 2-year mission for my church. Okay. So I went to southern Spain, actually, where we met, right?
Yep, obviously.
So,
yeah.
I remember telling Austin, we were in southern Spain, and he'd be like, man, like, what'd you do? I kind of told him a little bit what we did, and then it's funny how that, we'll get into more of that later on, but like those conversations we had, actually sparked what we're doing now. And that's the craziest thing, is that, that first job I ever got, I come home from my mission. I was in Colorado. I went to school for a semester, figured out that, school was never my thing. And, I had a wrestling scholarship. So I was going to school to wrestle, but then wrestling was a full-time job, and I had a wife and I wanted a family. And so I was like, this is really not working out for me. Right. So I left school, came to Utah, started working for one of my uncle's HVAC companies. Okay. And he did appliance repair and HVAC. And so I'm helping him run this business, and we're going along, and my brother Daniel was working here as well, and he met a plumber on a job. And this plumber, he would start talking to him, my brother Daniel, he's really smart, like super smart, and he asks a lot of questions, right? That's how he learns. He asks a ton of questions. So he started asking this guy questions like, hey, like, what do you do, And plumbing, if people don't understand, it's extremely hard to get into, right? You pretty much need a doctorate worth of time to be able to get your license and to be able to perform work in the plumbing trade. So he started asking this guy, like, hey, like, what do you do? How many employees do you have? How many trucks do you have? And this guy was just a man in a van. His brother worked with him. I think they had 2 trucks. And my brother was like, man, like, do you ever do any like work for other guys? Like if I was to sell a water heater, like, would you do it for me? Because we don't have a plumbing license. And the guy's like, yeah, like, and he's like, hey, are you looking for employees? Oh, no, I'm not really looking for anybody. And I remember after my brother started talking to that guy, right, he calls me up because I was at a different job. He's like, man, I met this plumber, and this guy, he's pretty freaking cool, and he said he maybe would want to work with us. I'm like, oh, it's cool. The next job he goes to, he sells a water heater. And he calls that guy up, and he says, hey, I sold you a water heater. I need you to come put it in. Like, I sold it. Like, you can have it. I just want to work with you. And this was his way of showing, hey, I want to work with you. So the guy shows up. He does a water heater and was like, man, these guys are crazy. And then Daniel started talking a little more and said, hey, I got a little brother, and he would love to come apprentice under you, right? And Daniel, he was a little bit higher up in the business than I was. And so he was using me, right, to say, hey, like, he'll come apprentice for you. And that was going to be our way in, because I could go and work for the guy. So I met with him. I remember vividly my interview with him was at the guy's parents' home, right? And his mom had a massage parlor in the basement. And our interview was on a massage bed in the basement. Like, he's sitting there, I'm sitting here, my brother Daniel's sitting right there, and we're just talking, right? And we're like, yeah, like, we would love to do it. I said, I have all the time in the world to be able to do it, I got experience in customer service. I know how to answer phones. I did appliance repair. I've never done actual plumbing. I've installed water heaters before. That's pretty easy, I've installed toilets. Yeah. Basically a plumber, I told the guy. And so he's like, well, yeah, okay, well, he hires me. And I remember the first job, right? And this is kind of like the pinnacle of my whole entire story. Is I remember the first job we went on, he was doing a remodel in the basement, right? Remodel is just studs. We're running water lines, we're putting drain lines in, and we're getting everything ready in this bathroom, right? And he says, hey, I sold a toilet upstairs. I need you to go put the toilet in, right? The house upstairs is all finished. I just needed to install a toilet. So I toilets come it's not just like a Home Depot toilet, right? It comes in all the pieces.
You got to build it.
You got to build it.
Yeah, you got to
right? So you got to build it. So I'm putting this thing all together, I'm like, oh yeah, this thing's looking pretty good. I put it all together. I'm pretty handy, right? Stick it on there with the wax ring, get all the water hooked up. I go to flush it just to test it out, right? Boosh, water. In between the bowl and the tank, there's that little rubber gasket. Well, I forgot to put that rubber gasket in there, and I mean water goes everywhere. And the worst part is me being pretty handy on my feet, like I'm like, okay, crap. I start taking it all apart, but the water had been seeping through the floor and was dripping down onto him. And so he's like, what in the hell is going on? So he walks upstairs. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, I'm just like, I forgot to put that seal in there. And he was just like, you've done this before, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I've done this before. But he knew right then, like, hey, this guy probably hasn't really done this a lot, right? And so I remember after that day, he's like, hey, let's go grab something to eat. I'm like, all right, sweet, let's go grab something to eat. So we go to Sizzlers. And I vividly remember he's like, man, I understand, like, you want to come work for me, but he's like, I just got to be frank with you. You just don't have enough experience for me to be able to take the van from my brother. And his brother was working part-time for him, right? That's why he wanted me, because I was going to be full-time. He's like, I don't know if I can take my brother's van and give it to you when you don't have the experience that I need.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just don't know if this is going to work out. I said, whoa. I said, just so you know, I'm a great guy, right? And not only am I a great guy, I'm an extremely fast learner. I said, the worst mistake for your business would be to not keep me around. I said, it's the worst mistake you'll ever make, is not taking the chance on me and giving me an opportunity. And I said, well, I'll take it out. I'll even go a step further. I said, you can give me whatever calls you want, however many calls you want. I'll run out of my wife's car, and I'm going to prove to you that I'm the guy that you want working for you. And he's like, any calls, however many calls, whether it's the good ones, the bad ones. I said, I don't care. Whatever calls you want to send me, you send them to me, and I'll run out of my wife's car. And I don't know many people have ever seen a big plumbing guy getting out of a Toyota Camry, coming up to fix your water heater or fix your, hose bib or whatever plumbing problem you have. But that was what we had going on, because I wanted to prove to him, right? He gave me the magnets to stick on the side of the doors, right? Real professional.
Chinese delivery guy over there, yeah.
So it was real professional. So he would guard going with it. And I mean, I probably got the worst calls that any plumbing guy could have ever imagined for 3 weeks. And I mean, every call I went to was literally, and I tell my guys this today, and you've heard me say it today a lot, is because it's actually really real to me. But every call I went to was an opportunity for me to make my dreams become reality. And so I made every single call absolutely worth it. So I'd go in there, and it doesn't matter what problem they had, I was their guy. I was not only going to take care of the problem that they had, I was going to make sure that they didn't have any other underlying problems that were going to cause problems for them in the future. And the customers knew when I walked into their home that I wasn't just there to take care of a leaky hose bib, right? I was there to take care of any problem that they had because I was their guy.
Yeah.
And in those 3 weeks, I billed a ton of money for the guy, right? I was billing a lot of money. And then he came to me, he's like, holy crap. It's like, you really want this? And I said, dude, I'm telling you, like, I want this more than anything. Okay. I just want an opportunity. Just give me an opportunity. So he took his brother's van, gave it to me, and that's how it started. Right. I started working for him. And I remember, because I started working for him in January, and we bought the business the 15th of November. So I started working for him in January, and we worked all the way through the year, right? And we started talking to him probably August. That's when I came to him and said, hey, I want to buy your business. His wife had a side business and he really didn't want to be into plumbing anyways. He'd worked for a bunch of plumbing companies his whole life, and he didn't really want to be in plumbing. And so I said, hey, I would really love the opportunity to buy this business. And he's like, okay, sweet. And he told us how much we needed to buy, how much we needed to come up with for him to sell us a business. And he was going to owner finance us on a big majority of it, right? But we had to come up with $70,000 up front. I mean, in those days, $70,000 it could have been $70 million, okay? For all I knew. It was just an outrageous number. We didn't really have any money, right? And so we set out to make this dream of owning our own plumbing company a reality, So I remember I called him up one day and I said, hey, would you mind if I started doing some work after work, right? Would you mind? Because, I don't want to step on your toes, and if I need to use my own truck, I will. My brother had a truck, and I said, hey, would you mind if I started doing plumbing jobs for like my friends and family or people that we find? I'm not going to be doing anything like with your calls or anything like that. And he's like, man, I've never had an employee ask me if they can do side work before, right? They usually just do the side work, and then I'm like, well, I really appreciate the opportunity that I have here, and anything that I can do to be able to get to the point where I can buy the business, I just want to do it. And he's like, yeah, sure, I don't care. So I remember there was a little neighborhood that we had a friend that lived in. It was an older folk neighborhood, right? They had a mobile home park, and it was like a 50 and up. And we knew people that lived in there, and so they had a problem underneath their home where the water lines, they had old poly pipe, and it busted, and there was water getting everywhere. So they called me up, and no, it was actually a lady in the ward of my uncle said that had a problem. So we went over there, and I repiped her house, crawled underneath there, right? Had to cut all the insulation, rerun water lines. I don't know if you've ever
those are
been in
nasty
those crawl
jobs.
spaces.
Those are
terrible
nasty jobs.
Like the worst jobs you could ever possibly imagine, right? And the hard part is I would work all day long for my boss, right? And he kept me running all day long. And the only time I had to do the repipes were at night. So I'd work all day long, and as soon as I got off work, right, didn't matter what time it was, then I'd go over there and I start repiping. So I repiped her house, and then the next door neighbor come over, and she's like, hey, will you take a look at mine? I go in there, galvanize or poly pipe. I'm like, yeah, it's leaking here, multiple joints. She said, well, do mine too. And then it started from there till we did probably 30 in that neighborhood, right? And we weren't very smart on like what to charge. We didn't know really what to charge. And so we started giving these people good deals, and they just started flocking to us, right? We had more work we could imagine. So we work all day at our real jobs. We'd work all night doing the replumbing houses underneath the house. And then I'd show back up in the morning, I'd take a shower, and I'd go back to work again all day, and then I'd sleep that night. And then we'd start the process over again. And we worked 7 days a week. And that's how we saved up enough money to be able to buy the business.
Wow.
So started working in January. Right around August, we started negotiations with him, telling him we wanted to buy the business. And then 15th of November of 2015, we bought the business. And it was just my brother and I, right? He gave us the vans, minor stock that he had. And he's like, we got all the phone numbers turned over, the website, and we were officially plumbing business owners.
So in less than a year, you went from employee who was getting fired to the guy running out of a Toyota Camry running calls to now owning a business.
Yep.
And all it took was working 24/7 every single day.
And the crazy thing is like that whole entire process was so hard. It was so nerve-wracking for me, not only me, I remember there was times that I would be underneath the house plumbing, and I'd be like yelling to my brother, like, hey, give me this. And he wouldn't respond. I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing, right? And I remember vividly one time I popped my head through the little like access.
Yeah, the access door.
The access door, right? And our customer, the access door is in his closet. So the customer's in his room sleeping, right? His arms like hanging off the bed. And my brother had literally fallen asleep on the floor. And it was like him sleeping on the floor, customer sleeping right here, and I'm under the house like trying to replumb this house, And all of that taught me how to plumb, like the constant hours of me plumbing, drain lines and everything I was doing at work. I was going to school too. I was going to plumbing school because I wanted to get my license as fast as possible. So I was going to plumbing school twice a week too. And just all of that, right, really taught me the majority of what I needed to know to be able to own the business. I remember being in an apprentice plumbing school, and our instructors up there talking about how like this and that, and all these kids they're working for these commercial companies, and I was the owner of my business, and we had employees working for us, and it was crazy. Like these guys are just these guys in this apprentice school didn't really know much. They didn't really know much about life, right? And we're over here trying to build a pretty big business, and compete with businesses that were humongous. Plumbing businesses have been around for 15, 20 years.
Jeez, just a couple of guys just by the what do they call it? Picking up by yourself by your bootstraps, right?
Yep.
Just getting it done. And if there's anything like the American dream teaches us, is that that's possible. And so having done it, having grown up in it, and then done it yourself, and seeing where it can go. And let's just address that. So you start off small potatoes, taking over this man-in-a-van company as you described it, working your butts off to make it happen. And now, like, I'm sure in the podcast we'll get into a lot more of like the story and how we've built it, what we've done. But now, what does the company look like? How many employees do you have? How many years did it take? Like, where did we go? So we've come from these small, humble beginnings, almost getting fired, to digging in the trenches and working like a slave, to now, today. What do you got today?
You know, that it's the American dream is real. And that's the one thing that, you know, really the reason behind wanting to do this and to tell the story and stuff is to really have people understand that you can go from wherever you're at to being whatever you want to be, as long as you're willing to put in the work. So we went from 0 employees, right? Just my brother and I, right? In 2015 to currently right now, right? We own 4 brands here in Utah, right? And we coach multiple companies throughout the United States on how to scale and grow their plumbing business, right? And here in Utah, we're on track to do 40 million, and we have 140, 150 employees right now.
Yeah.
So like, and we're growing immensely. You know, it's like we're growing and growing and growing and growing every single year, right? 40 million this year, 60 million next year, 100 million in 3 years, and we're going to Denver, we're going to Phoenix, we're branching out. My brother went to Dallas already, so we're branching out at such a rapid rate because, one, we figured out, hey, there's a process to being able to get to the point we're at, and we figured out that process, and we figured out how to scale the business very, very rapidly because we came from not having anything and figuring out, hey, there's a way we can get to that, And in 2015, there was just 2 of us, right? We started out, we didn't really know what we were going to do, started getting plumbing jobs and doing little tiny plumbing jobs here and there, to fast forward to 2017 where we're like, hey, I have a couple of guys that I've really looked up to, the friendly plumber here in town, Josh and Daniel, they were the owners of that company. And they, when I first started in my business, I would call them up, and I remember this vividly. I'd call these guys up. These are my competitors, by the way, right? I'd call them up, like, hey, I got this question. I remember Josh, he'd be like, well, you just got to do this. He'd always answer my questions, always answer my phone calls, and so to me, that always stood out, like, wow, like these guys, they're my direct competitors, and they're just answering every question that I have, and they were very, very, they helped me out a ton. And so in 2017, they were telling us all in that time between 2015 and 2017, like, hey, sewer and underground is where you guys need to be at, right? They were doing a lot of it, and we didn't really understand it. We thought, owning a plumbing company was putting in water heaters and doing repipes and stuff, just stuff we had done. So then we fast forward to 2017, we start doing more and more drain cleanings, right? We start getting more and more drain cleaning customers that are like, man, we need this service, right? And then we start figuring out the sewers are really bad. And sewer in the plumbing world, right? Sewers is what I equivalent to like Mercedes-Benz, right? And all the rest of the plumbing inside the house, that's like your Toyotas and your just your name brand stuff, right? If you own a Toyota, you can pretty much take anybody and they can fix it, right? But if you own a Mercedes-Benz, you really have to take that Mercedes-Benz to a Mercedes qualified person to fix it, right? So I understood that with the sewers, like, hey, sewers in Utah are 8 to 10 feet deep, right? In order to dig 8 to 10 feet and to replace a sewer line and to do it effectively without having tons of problems and to make sure that it's going to not only fix the problem but last in the future, like, you got to be skilled to do that, right? So we started training, consuming as much information we possibly could about it, right? We rebranded. 2017, right? We rebranded our name to implement the rooter, right? Because we would go to people's houses. Our business was called Connections Plumbing, right? Connections with a Z. And we'd go to these people's houses and they'd say, oh, well, the rooter guy, he says this. And I heard that after so many times. I'm like, my goodness, man, am I not the rooter guy here? Like, or what's going on, right? So we rebranded our name, right? And that's where the 24-hour Rooter Connections comes from, right? So then we established ourselves. And I remember in 2017, I put out my first ad. And here in Utah, print media, coupons are huge. People are couponers, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I remember I put out my first ad, and it was a half-page ad, and all we did was sewer ads, right? And I put up in there a bubble in the top, right? It said Utah's #1 sewer company, right? And I vividly remember it. We didn't even have lining equipment. We'd never done our first liner before. And I vividly remember people calling us like, hey, I heard you're Utah's #1 sewer company. We really want you doing our sewer. And I said, absolutely, 100%. I am the best sewer guy you will ever find in Utah. And that's where our 100% lifetime guarantee on a sewer liner came from, right? I said, if we're going to be the best, we need to have something that backs us as being the best, right? And that's where we guarantee a sewer line if we put a liner in it for life. And it's transferable to the next owner. So if you were to sell your house, it's going to transfer that lifetime guarantee to the next customer as well. Okay. And we went from not owning any lining equipment in 2017 to, running 6 excavation crews. I think we have 7 excavation crews now, and we run 2 lining crews, and we're shooting anywhere from 40 to 50,000 feet of liner a year.
Wow. That's a lot of liner.
It's a lot when you think about it,
liner.
And it's like we had a dream, and a dream was to grow and to be the best at something, and we set ourselves up. So 2017 to 2019, right? My brother John comes back to work for me. He was going to school, right? He comes back to work for me. He's been integral in our entire growth, right? My brother Matt, he came over from Denver, decided to start working for me. I said, hey, you're gonna understand the underground, and you're gonna run the underground like I've never seen before, right? So he loves that kind of stuff. So he got into the underground, started digging the holes. John was selling, right? And I was trying to scale the business as fast as I possibly could, trying to recruit people and grow the business as fast as I possibly could. So 2021 comes around, right? It was 2021. 2021 comes around, and I vividly remember when I showed up to Utah in 2014, right? My dad's company was called Action. And here in Utah in 2014, 2013, Action Plumbing they were the real deal. You couldn't go anywhere and not see their vans. And I remember I told my brother, I said, one day we're going to own that business. And he was just like, what the heck? They're the biggest plumbing company around. And I said, yeah, one day we're going to own that business. So fast forward to 2021, right? We built a pretty strong underground crew. Like we're known for our underground here in Utah, right? We do tons of it. And we have a different way of going about how we do underground and how we sell it, right? We created a different sales process. We created a different process to installing it. And so that's what really allowed us to get to the point where people were starting to notice us, right? And in 2021, every single one of us was 30 years old, or 30 years or less years old, right? So we got a bunch of young kids running this place, right? And 2021 comes around, and Action gives us a call and says, hey, we're selling. Would you guys be interested in buying? I'm like, holy crap, So I get on the phone, and I'm like talking with them, and she's like, and Bonnie, she's a good friend of ours, but Bonnie says, hey, Jim, her husband, was just sick, and the business really wasn't doing what they wanted to do, and they just were ready to get out. And she's like, I really want my business to go to somebody who I think is going to take it to the next level, right? And not just piss it away. Action Plumbing's been around since the late 90s, right? We're talking a long time it's been around. And so she wanted to go to somebody, and she saw us young guys, hungry, ready for the next step. And so we go through all the negotiations, we go through everything, and it was great to work with. We ended up buying it in February of 21. Right? So we go from no employees in 2015 to rebranding in 2017. 2019, we pick up our real first top level salespeople, and we're training them. And 2021 comes around, and it's like we have an opportunity to buy one of the biggest plumbing companies in the state. And it's like, holy crap, And I think at that point in 2021, I think we were doing, 7 million, right? And which for us, we're like, freak, we're killing it.
Big money.
We didn't have a clue, like what our potential was, right? We knew like we were growing, and we were growing pretty fast, but like we didn't know anything. And so I remember we bought it in February of 21, and that first year we ended up doing 14 million, right? 2022 comes around. So 2021 we did 14 million, 22 comes around, we did 18 million, and then 2023 we did 24 million, right? And it's just like every year has just been a next level. And anybody who's grown real fast and grown companies, when you're jumping in the millions, you got so much stuff that's come along with that, right? The overhead and the buildings, it's like we ran out of a 7,000 square foot building, and we were doing 20 million, right? We had crews showing up at different parts of the day just so we could get them in to do a training because there was too many trucks everywhere, right? Bought a new building, able to put everything in one house, has been a very intricate part, and it's just been snowballing, right? We have HVAC now, we have electrical, and when we bought Action, all of that stuff came along with it, right? Which we had knowledge in HVAC, right? We'd done HVAC before. We'd never done electrical before, and that was a new part of the business. And we still had to keep up on our number one sewer company, right? And when we bought Action, the greatest thing about Action, is that their customers are so loyal, and everybody knows Action. So when we started our marketing campaigns and we started everything with Action, it was just like, holy crap, like the amount of calls that we get and the amount of recognition we get is crazy.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing. And having personally experienced a lot of that, being there, seeing the changes, seeing whenever we got Action, we're able to acquire that. I remember going to these customers who had been members with Action for a very long time, and Action wasn't known for their sewers. Like, they did not do sewers. And so that was one thing as a camera technician, as a guy who specialized only in the sewer work, going and running the cameras for these customers. It was just it's a breath of fresh air. And the sales increase from all these new customers, this whole new pool of customers, it was amazing. Those days were getting crazy as we're essentially doubling our business, and a lot of it being sewers. Like, our crews were just nonstop banging all day long, and it was like the Wild West back then.
And that's the craziest thing, like I talk to so many entrepreneurs nowadays, especially in the trades. So many guys are like, man, if I just had more calls, I could do more. And I say, yeah, like everybody wishes for more calls until you have the calls and you don't have your planning in place, right? You don't have the systems and processes in place. And if you don't have the systems and processes in place, once you get the calls, all it does is add to more problems, right?
Yeah.
You start raining down more problems because you're increasing your workload, right? And if your guys aren't ready and they're not trained, right, it just creates total mayhem. And so that's one of the things that we've really focused on, especially in the last few years, because we're getting calls, is our training, and how much training is needed when you're running a big company is astronomical. You'd never think, hey, I train every single day, 300 days a year, and we got to train on the same stuff every single week, every single month, right? We're hitting the same points. We're doing the same training, right? And the cool thing about us, and this is what I've always really prided ourselves on, is that we don't usually hire from the trades, right? Like you came to me as a countertop salesperson, right? You're selling stuff with countertops, right? And I said, I could teach you how to sell sewers. I could teach you how to be a plumber, like that, right? All you needed was an opportunity, and I taught you how to do it, and it completely changed everything that you were doing.
Yeah.
And we do that with so many different guys. And that's one thing that we've really brought to the industry is teaching guys, like, because, we're creatures of habit, right? Especially as business owners, the easiest thing to do sometimes is not always the best thing to do. And a lot of times we're like, oh, everybody's poaching everybody's employees, right? Everybody's like going after these guys. And I've never really been like that. I've always been the kind of guy where it's like, I'm going to get these guys, because I tell everybody all the time, it's easier to teach a salesman to plumb than it is to teach a plumber to sell. Okay. In our industry, we have to sell the jobs. We have to go to these customers' homes. We have to create a customer experience that is so spectacular that they're going to want to literally throw their money into a sewer that's 10 feet deep in their front yard, right? We have to be so spectacular. We have to train so hard that we can do that, right? So you do have to have sales ability, right? But like I say all the time, right? There's no such thing as good. There's trained and untrained, right? So either we're going to train and we're going to be the best and we're going to offer the best customer experience, or we're going to be untrained and we're not going to offer a customer experience and we're not going to be very good. You know, that's one of the things that's really helped us grow year over year from the very beginning, is that our tenacity for training, right? We're just hungry for it. Every single day we go in the office and the guys are ready to train. They're ready to get in there and just get after it. And I think that's, honestly has been one of the greatest things for us in our quest.
I think that's one of the biggest things as far as like Action Academy, where it came from, the Action Army, right? It originated from, hey, we have this great sales process. We do training. It was a little bit unorganized. And so how do we now create this training machine that's going to be able to not only take our guys to the next level, but really bring it down to a process that can be measured, a process that can be repeated, to make sure that we're creating people that are going to drive that vision forward.
Yeah, and it's all about that consistency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So we can talk all day long, and that's what we did. We did for a long time, and we're pretty good at talking, right? We're pretty good at talking to the guys and teaching them, but the consistency of checking numbers, the consistency of making sure that our word tracks are on point, right? Consistency of making sure that we're handling customers' objections, right? And the consistency of making sure our customer experience is top notch is what's hard. And that's why a lot of people struggle in this industry, right? And the more you strive to be consistent, the more money you make. It's just a byproduct of, if your customer experience is perfect and you're striving for that customer to be happy all the time, making money is just a byproduct of it, right? If your customer experience is so perfect and they're so happy with you, they're going to buy from you because they have a real problem. They have a real need for you to be there. And if you are the professional and you're there to take care of their problem, why wouldn't they buy from you?
Right. And as much as I believe that's true, Ben, I will offer this. Not all opportunities are equal. The opportunity to actually make money in the trades is insane. And trust me, you've kind of been in the home services and been on one track almost, it seems like, your entire life, like a bullet, just right on target. I haven't, right? And we'll get more into my story at a different time, but I've sold so many different things. And as good as you are, doesn't always equal more money. And so being here, I could tell you firsthand the opportunity in the trades to make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, which is just crazy money for a guy who can't even graduate high school, right, is unique. And that's the greatest thing about what Action does, Action Academy, Action Army, is taking guys who don't know anything about plumbing, HVAC, or electrical, teaching them how to be true salesmen, which are customer focused and really obsessed with their experience and making sure that we take care of them and fix their problems permanently, and then giving them this wonderful opportunity on the back end to provide at a level that they probably didn't even know was possible without being some doctor or lawyer or something like that. We make more money than those guys. Like on average, yeah, we make more money than those guys.
Yeah, I was talking to my brother the other day, and I was telling him, I said, I cannot believe how we've created this money-making machine. And, I told him, I said, I can't count on my hands or toes how many guys that have gone through our system that are currently making more than $150,000 to $200,000 a year. I can't count on my hands and toes. Yeah. And I probably couldn't count on my hands the guys that I know that have come through our system that are making more than $300,000 a year, right? And these are guys that have never, the most they ever made in a job was $50,000-$60,000 a year, right? They weren't very good at school. You know, people told them like, hey, you can't have a good paying job because you're not a doctor or lawyer. You didn't get through school. You know, that's crazy to me, because in the trades, in this industry, the sky's the limit. You can be whatever you want to be as long as you're willing to put in the time, as long as you're willing to put in the effort, and as long as you're willing to just never quit, right? And that's one thing that with us, you know, is like, I tell people all the time, you know, I remember vividly my wife, you know her, my wife is extremely, I tell people, you know, it's funny. I tell her my wife's crazy, right? If I tell her I'm going to do something, right, and I say, hey, this is my goal, I'm going to do this, she will not let me quit.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, my goal is to run the biggest, most profitable plumbing, HVAC, and electrical company in the state. She said, okay, sweet. Right. And we start going about it, and I'm working those crazy nights. Right. I remember one day I come home and I crawling up the stairs. It was probably like 6:30 in the morning. Right. And I hadn't slept all day, all night. Right. We'd been working, and I was dirty. I was covered from head to toe, just dirt. And I literally was untying my boots, and I woke up, and she was nudging me. She was like kind of kicking me, you know, like I still had my bootstrings in my hand. I was passed out on the floor, and she's like nudging me. And I'm thinking like, oh, you know, I hadn't seen her in a couple of days. You know, we had 2 little kids. She was gonna be like, oh, you know, get showered and come lay with me, cuddle with me in bed. She's like, hey, you got to go back to work. Like it's getting late. You're gonna have to get back going. You know,
just no mercy.
Yeah, she's just like, she knew what the goal was, right?
Yeah.
And she knew that if she gave me a way out, right, and she said, oh, your job sucks, or hey, why do you always have to work so long, or blah, 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 you know, that was just going to give me another reason to not be who I wanted to be, right? And so her in my journey, right, and she helped me in the office, and she, you know, we'll get into all of that later on, but like her in my journey and the way that she pushed me to be who I am, you know, I wouldn't be who I am right now if it wasn't for her. So it's like that driving force, you know, and just pushing me in the direction of where we're at now has been crazy.
Well, she knew what she was sacrificing for just as much as you did. And being a team like that it's amazing. Right. But obviously she was sacrificing just as much as you were, different ways, right? Having to stay home and take care of the kids and all by herself, basically a single mom.
Oh yeah.
For a while.
And, you know, there wasn't always, we were taking as much of the money as we possibly could, and we were putting it back into business. You know, it was just like a revolving door. The money would come in and go out, money come in and go out, you know, and we'd keep enough we could to be able to live on, you know, but it wasn't like, for them first couple of years, we weren't living lavishly, you know. And I tell people all the time, especially people we're coaching now, and I say, hey, if you want to skip that phase, if you want to skip that whole entire, like, oh, we don't make any money ever, you know, like, buy your time back. Let me coach you, right? I will teach you how to not go through those problems, okay? And that's what we're doing now. That's what the Action Academy is. That's what this Action Army is, right? Is we're now getting to the point where we understand the business so well that we can take people and we can say, hey, this is what the template is to being successful, right? And then you can take that template and you can plug it into your business and you can run with it, and you can literally be whatever you want to be, right? You can literally buy your time back. And that to me is so powerful. I tell people all the time, I tell my brother, I said, man, if I'd had that opportunity, I'd have worked all night, 7 days a week to be able to buy that time back so we didn't have to go through all that, you know? It was just crazy. And to be in, you know, with our buying power, you know, all the deals we had to create with the warehouses, all the connections we had to create with, you know, negotiations on equipment, right? I mean, we've gone through every single step of that whole entire process to be where we're at right now, right? And it's cost us dearly. I tell everybody I got a doctorate. I have a doctorate in plumbing. I got a doctorate in HVAC, and I got a doctorate in electrical. Okay.
And more importantly in business.
More importantly in business.
And maybe even more than just a doctorate, because you started when you were 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been studying a long time, and I've paid my dues, and that's really made me who I am today. You know, and that And the trades, are responsible for all of that. They've given me an opportunity to have the life that I have now, and given me an opportunity not just to have the life that I have now, but the opportunity that I can share that with other people, and I can change other people's lives within the trades, within having a job that is so great that you can literally be whatever you want to be. Right? If you think like, hey, I want a dream house up on the hill, you can have it. If you want to drive that sports car, you want to drive the G-Wagon, you can have it. If you want to have a ranch with hundreds of horses around, you can have it.
Yeah.
And you can do it all within the trades. And that's the greatest thing. And, that's why we live in the greatest country on the earth, is that we can sit here and we can talk about it in less than 10 years. We've created this process and this business that supplies money to hundreds of people, right? And we've affected thousands of people's lives, right? And we want to get to the point where we're affecting hundreds of thousands of people's lives and millions of people's lives, right? Because, this is, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest industries in the world.
Truly, it's all about what you said earlier, the opportunity to make your dreams become a reality. And having that opportunity in front of you and being willing to invest the time into people is definitely unique. I think it's hard. You're hard pressed to find an employer who probably cares as much as you do about helping people actually make their dreams become a reality.
Well, it's kind of crazy, as we were talking about this morning, right? We brought all of our excavation guys into the room, right? And these are guys that are literally in the trenches, right? They're in the muck, they're in the dirt,
Tough job.
It's a tough job, right? And I'm literally telling them when we're talking about it this morning, right? It's like, hey, you're here now, right? 5 years ago, I was digging trenches. I was in the holes. I was in the literal shit.
Yeah.
Okay. And, now I'm in a completely different role, right? I'm still in the trenches, but not literally in the trenches, right? And I'm telling them, hey, you guys can literally be whatever you want to be, right? And it starts right here. It starts with what you're willing to do today, right? It starts with how much you want to be successful. And if you want to be successful, get 1% better every day. You get 1% better every day and you invest into your self-improvement, there's nothing that will stop you from being whatever you want to be, right? Even if you're digging holes 7 days a week. I was digging holes 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You remember that. You guys were forcing it down my throat. Okay. And it's like every single hole I went to, every single job I went to, every single sewer that I fixed, was just another opportunity for me to have the dream life that I have. Right. And it's just another opportunity that I have to be able to, sit down and do this podcast, and talk about this kind of stuff and to teach other people. Right. And that's my true passion, is to be able to get to a point where I can teach everybody how to do what I did. Right. I tell my employees all the time, it's like, being successful doesn't keep me up at night, right? The thought of not being successful doesn't keep me up at night. A lot of people, that keeps people up at night, right? It's like, hey, am I going to be successful? What keeps me up at night is that I have such an opportunity to change so many people's lives, and I won't be able to do it, right? I tell my guys all the time, if your life is not seriously altered by having known me, right? If your life is not 100 times or 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times better than it was prior to knowing me, I haven't done my job. And that keeps me up at night. And that really makes me, it gives me cold sweats. Like if my guys their lives aren't completely different having known me, or if the people that I come in contact with aren't significantly better off having known me, I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing what God gave me the gift to do, which was to understand this certain industry, right? And teach people how to do it.
Well, Ben, what an amazing story. And that's like such a powerful story of where you come from, where you've gone, and, where we're going, just bigger and better things. Like we think we're at a level now, 5 years, 10 years from now. I can't wait to see what that's going to turn into for sure. So it's been great getting to know more about your story, and excited to get the podcast going and get recording these things.
Yeah. Like Austin's saying, this for us is an opportunity to just put it out there, right? And we love this, and I really appreciate everybody that's helped me out to get to this point where I can sit down and we can talk about it, and we're gonna continue pushing out a lot more content of how you can have your dream life and how you can be whoever you want to be. So appreciate your time, Austin, today.
Yeah, thank you guys.